Like
So much of advanced planning.
This is just to break the ice.
Yeah, this is good though. I like it.
Sumit has already broken ice in his drink.
I have to hear these stories now.
it's important to learn from earlier sessions.
Siram, where are you based?
Bangalore, Neelam.
Okay, so
Oh,
you love
Bhakti
Bangalore.
We were just saying that Bangalore is the like the base for all sustainability people.
Okay, guys, let's start. Friday morning, 11 a.m. And we have a session called Wastewater Matters. First of all, I think, I was talking to Simar and she said that the word itself is not right. Water can never be waste. But what the good part today is that we are not going to discuss COVID. After such a long time, I'm so happy, and Devin also, just raised the same thing a few minutes back with me that, hey, for a change, we are on a subject which is away from COVID. It's an interesting panel today. When I first looked at it, I thought, hey, what do we cover in this? And as the days passed, I think things got clearer and we have a number of good things. We have a very interesting panel today. We have Nilanjan Bhowal, who's an architect and designer, and he works around the country. I loved his recent project he did in Kerala. I must mention, people, you should see that. Deben Moser, who's an architect, as well as he's the head of a leading IPC PMC function. We got Dr. Bhakti, who's a civil engineer from India, but then he moved on to Australia. And recently, a couple of years back, she moved back to India and is a water conservation expert. We've got Sriram, who's actually a technology guy who was doing well in US. And one night he had a dream and he suddenly changed gears and is now become a sustainability champion. And lastly, we've got Simar, who's from a communication background, but is now a brand catalyst. So we've got hardcore specialist people in this panel, and we will cover a lot of interesting points and we'll get views from the experts. In the morning, I saw one of my WhatsApp messages, and I read a very interesting line. India is a nice house on a bad street. This was a comment by somebody in JP Morgan. I was just going through that, and this line just stuck with me, and I thought of sharing with all of you today. India is a nice house on a bad street. And this kind of resonates with me when you look at water. We all would want to see and imagine a world full of clear water with people, stuck recently indoors. This did seem to be a reality. I was talking to Sima the other day, and I was telling her the moment this COVID thing clears, I have plans to go to Rishikesh and enjoy the crystal clear waters of the Ganges. While I've not been able to go to Ganges because there is a COVID test required and you had multiple other things, but I did manage to go down over to Noida and see Yamuna, which was a fate better than what it was earlier. With no pollution, as no factories were pushing pollutants into the rivers. Interesting time, interesting days, and I hope you have a good time today during the session. I'm going to start with Sriram. As his journey into me that being a techie and working in the US, which all of us, a lot of people in India dream of moving to US and be in the technology area also. What made him move from technology to climate change and now a wastewater champion? Sriram.
Hi, thanks, Sumit, and hi, everybody, especially the panelists. I mean, it's great to be here. I'm sure I'll learn more than share, but here's my thing. You're right. I was like many Indians who went and did a master's and work in tech industry. What was good for me was I was working in California, and I studied in New Orleans, and I missed Katrina by 6 months. Hurricane Katrina, which inundated the entire city. It's so funny. I mean, it's sad, but it's funny in the way it happened. There's 6 months I missed it by 6 months. I was already in California, and my name was on the lease of the house I lived in New Orleans. And I get an email from the town of New Orleans, right, saying 3 months later, saying your house has been selected for demolition. First of all, I only have a lease, right? I don't own the house. And I was amazed. And my roommates went there who were not lucky to have moved out. And 4 months later, they found our washing machine. And this is a second floor house. Huh? Second floor house. The washing machine was stuck in the window. And we had 6 inches of silt when they walked there 100 days after Katrina. So I think the power of water and what it can do was stuck. And sustainability, the point of climate change, and how fragile we as a species are, was really hitting me. And California was a great place to be because for all its natural beauty, California also exposed me to a lot of climate change initiatives and stuff. But quickly, what changed for me was I was in a nonprofit called AID. I strongly urge all of you to read about it, Association for India's Development. Swadesh movie was based on the founder of AID, in fact. And that was a key change because I used to volunteer in California and think my wife and I used to do a lot of work in volunteering, and we felt good thinking we're already doing something in climate change. But AID exposed me to the social and impact in India because of a very frivolous and unsustainable life in America. And those days, back in 2009, 6 Indians were living with the same climate impact as 1 American. I think that those numbers were staggering to me. And, that was enough. I felt that I should do something in climate change space. I was always interested. I studied in a business school called Presidio School, Graduate School, which is an only sustainability school. And that was a nice trigger. I figured that I could move into this. I might never make a career like IT, but as far as financial is concerned, but I was very happy. My wife was supremely supportive, and we moved to India. And 8 years in Smartism, I started, and we've been very happy and extremely excited with what we've done. And I always tell people that this is still at early stages of what we can do in climate change. I call ourselves still a startup, even though we are so many years into it, because I think we're still touching the tip of the iceberg of trying to go back on climate change. I hope I stuck to your 3-minute thing.
No, you don't have to. So don't look at the watch at all. Let me do the honors of stopping when people, are. Don't worry on that. I sometimes work like a headmaster on these things. The interesting thing which I get from your, your conversation, your description is, you should do what is close to your heart. Money is not everything. So what is making you, call your stuff still a startup after being there for so many years shows the passion you have. You've actually achieved a good place for yourself in the industry, and still, you're calling yourself a startup. Hats off, Sriram.
Thank you.
Moving on, we've got Dr. Bhakti, who's also had a kind of a similar, experience where she started. She studied in India. She did a civil engineer degree and then moved on to Australia, worked for a number of years in Australia, and then moved back to India. Bhakti, I'm not going to ask you for your journey like that, like I asked Sriram. So I'm straight away going to, ask you for something which happened recently, and I think a proud moment for you. You were recently appointed as the National President of Water Resources Council at WICCI. Could you tell us more about this?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and great to be here. So yes, it is an exciting opportunity to be serving as a national president for Water Resources Council at WICCI. So I just want to tell you a little bit about WICCI. WICCI is basically Women in Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So it does represent businesses and industries, and particularly the women representatives of them. And Water Resources Council is one of the many verticals within WICCI. And I think it's exciting because as national president, of course, I'm in the process of appointing some active, dynamic women as state presidents. And so the reason it's an exciting opportunity is to, it gives you that platform and visibility, and what we seek to do through this platform and a network of, very active and dynamic women is to simple. It's just to make sure that women and water are part of the agenda, important agenda, whether it's any organization, any business, any community. When you start having women on the table discussing water as an important part, then we can make a shift from where we are today. So that is, it provides us a platform to influence stakeholders, influence policies. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And also, I want to say that the reason we have called it a Water Resources Council is because in order to make that shift from where we are in this water crisis, what has got us to this place is the fact that we actually have to look at water, all types of water as a resource. So in that context, actually, that's why wastewater does indeed matter, because wastewater is simply a water resource. And so that's what it is. So we want people to shift the thinking from looking at any type of water as one water, and that way, that is a beginning of how you start to manage water and bring yourself out of the crisis.
Thank you, Doctor. Can I ask you one more thing? On the lighter
Yes,
side,
sure.
why is there a gender bias?
Well, good question. I did not cover that. So what we believe, having worked in the water sector for 30 long years, I certainly have seen, that water sector is very heavily male dominated and very heavily engineering dominated. And if we have to correct the mistakes of the groupthink that has landed us in this position, we have to undo it by involving women, including women in all the discussions, and also including water as an important agenda in all kinds of activities, whether it's a community or organization. So yes, it is not to say that, in fact, it will be the great opportunity that the women will be making sure that we are at the table, which is already dominated by men anyway. So you're not going to be excluded.
Fascinated. But it is all sounding like the men are dirtying the water and women are going to clean it up now. Okay, moving on. Nilanjan, you're an architect and a designer, and I would say you play a big part in defining that water is used in the right way, and it is being thought through right from the start of any project, and you don't miss out on that. But let me ask you this: how much importance do you guys give in planning for wastewater management? And it'll help if you can give explain with an example.
Thanks, Sumit. It's a very pertinent question. As an architect and designer, I personally look at not just water, but all natural resource management in all our projects. It's the key element. And handling water particularly has two aspects to it. One is the saving of water within the project, how much water you consume. And the second part is the water that is generated as a waste. How do we handle that? A third smaller component is the natural water in the form of rains or surface drainage, which largely is neglected. So when we come to a site, the first thing I look at is what do we do with the water, and because that's the most precious resource, and the foliage, the landscape, the soil. So we look at surface drainage because that is the most important aspect in our projects. In fact, you see the problems that we are facing in a lot of cities: floods, landslides in fragile ecosystems like in the hills. Most of them are caused because the natural rainwater is not allowed to drain off in the way they were designed to be in nature. Because in nature, water finds its way. If you imagine hundreds and thousands of years ago, all the cities were never flooded. Water, the surface is designed, the earth is designed in a way that the water drains into the small little streams that join the rivers and finally joins the ocean. Now, we as designers, architects, planners, as humans and occupiers of the land, have blocked those natural rainwater channels. Look at what happened in Gurgaon, for instance. Look at what happens in Mumbai every year. It's only because we have stopped the natural rainwater channels. So if we respect nature, I think we'll all be able to live comfortably. So that's been my basic premise while designing a project. So the surface drainage is most important. Rainwater, of course, we harvest as much as possible. Again, the water that runs off the roof, and especially in the hills. Why I'm saying the hills is because there is a steep terrain, the topography, and we have to make sure that the rainwater is channelized, captured in catchment areas, into small, ponds or small water bodies. So since you asked for an example, let me give you this example in Bhimtal and also Mukteshwar, a couple of projects that we have done. All the roof water and the surface water collects in small little lotus ponds. If that is full, it overflows and lands up in a pond slightly lower. And all the rainwater channels are exposed. They are not hidden underground in pipes. So we actually celebrate water. We don't hide the rainwater or surface drainage. We make it a landscape feature. So we have these very wide drains which are covered with white pebbles. So in the monsoons, you can hear that little gurgling water stream. I think that is a great healing when it excites your other senses besides the visual. As I always say, architecture has to appeal to all the five senses and not only the visual. So the auditory senses, the tactile, the sense of smell, when you smell the wet earth during the rains, all that is very important in design. So these rainwater channels are full of white pebbles, at places gray pebbles. So even during the non-rainy seasons, they become a landscape feature. And during the rains, the water trickles through them and collects in these small ponds, then overflows into lotus ponds, then overflows, and finally at the lowest level, we create a harvesting tank. Now that is the surface drainage and taking care of that. For within the projects, within the habitat that we design, of course, we look at management of water. So we are using low flow fixtures, which are very easily available. And then the water that is generated from the mainly the kitchens and the washrooms, that has to be taken care of. So we have very nice systems these days of treating the wastewater, all the gray water that comes out from the washroom. There's a phytorid bed, and that also in a project we have used it as a. All you have to do is make that water, pump it up to a certain level, and make it flow through several layers of gravels over small little shelves, and then put plants, and they which kind of aerates the water and cleans it up. So at the lowest level you get clean filtered water which you can use for watering your lawns and other things. So I think if you uh, can really respect all these elements of nature, you can use them as part of design, and it only adds to your project value. So that's how I think as a designer.
Thanks, Nilanjan, and I love this natural purification of water process which you spoke of. But you didn't, I know you're making your own house. Aren't you using these technologies at your home?
Yeah. All of them.
I assume
In fact, very soon you visited one of the terraces.
Yes, I did.
And there also we have all the rainwater is harvested. All the water that comes on the lawn, it's collected through a drain. Next time when you're there during the day and not in the evening, we can have a look at the rainwater canal and how I'm using that water, recycling all the water. All the water is recycled.
I have noted more important things over here, your connections in Bhimtal and other places. So my next holiday, I know where to go. You're going to put me in some place. And you also spoke of, the natural movement of water, which I could relate to when you spoke of the Gurgaon flooding. Gurgaon is in a situation where it's the Aravali surrounded, and water from Aravali's actually come down, and the high rises in the beginning are stopping the flow of water down to the city and the underpasses, and that's what I heard from one of the senior officials from the municipal corporation also. So it could, everything resonated very well with me, what you spoke of. Thank you, Nilanjan.
I just add, all over the other developed countries, you see water drains into the rivers, and every city is located on river banks, including your skiing background. If you look at it, all the European cities and they're using the natural river. Yamuna could be as beautiful as the background behind this.
True, true. This was, Dr. Bhakti was the inspiration for this. This is somewhere in Australia, so I had to get something from there. Okay, moving on. We've got a designer who's spoken. We've got, two specialists, water specialists who've spoken, and we have a project management, head of a leading IPC also with us, Deben, and he's also an architect by background, by qualification. Deben, you work with a lot of corporates in and around the country. Do you think the corporates actually give importance to wastewater management? Do they even bother?
I don't know why there is that, belief that the corporates are only concerned about minting money and they don't care about nature. That's not right. If you see, you've been in the corporate world, you're from the corporate world yourself, and I'm sure most of your facilities were LEED certified or would have sustainability as part of the core values, right? So, tagging corporates as someone who don't care about sustainability is not right. Corporates are well aware of the sustainability, and it's part of their core values. It's part of their, CSR initiatives. So they go for LEED certification. They go for GRIHA certification. Other day I was having a committee discussion with IGBC and CIA initiative for certifying logistic parks and warehouses for sustainability. So that's where the corporates are looking at. And it's not just that they just want to hang those certificates at the reception or in their boardrooms just to show that they care about nature. They genuinely care about the nature, and then that whole brief is downloaded to architects who are the advisors in terms of how that brief about sustainability can be translated into design and how it then works. So it's not limited to just one part. It's all of us are involved whenever we are doing a corporate office or designing a campus or a building. We all become stakeholders in that. So, but the brief has to come from top. If the corporates don't care, then the architects can't design, right? So it's a collective effort. I think it's a community effort. And as Nilanjan said, everybody needs to contribute to that. And we as project managers make sure that we follow processes and ways of conserving water. But even while doing construction, there's a lot of water which gets wasted. And recently in Gurgaon, they had actually prevented developers to use the water, which is potable water, for construction activity. And there was huge hue and cry regarding that. So yes, there is awareness, and we are part of that awareness movement.
Yeah, I agree, Deben, and you pointed out my angle to it, and that was a good start. It was like pointing the finger back at me, and I do recollect and remember working on many such projects. It's a passion which you have to have from inside, then only it will work, otherwise it won't. Which is what Sriram did. He just moved completely into it. I actually do remember, because this is a time when a lot of companies give out gifts to their employees and do some charitable or small CSR things. I remember one of corporate guy telling me that they did a very simple thing in their office, where they actually, instead of giving a bonsai or a diary or a pen, they actually gave water aerators to all their employees. So 4,000, 5,000 odd people. Actually, that company was bigger. That was around 200,000 big company.
Sorry to cut you, but again, coming from this, I was talking to one of the corporate real estate heads, and he said, we realized that the size of the glasses we provide to the employees is such that they end up using half of the water and throw the rest of the water. So they reduce the size of the cups. And that's a very innovative way of, conserving.
Small thoughts make a huge difference. Just everybody putting a water, aerator in their houses, suddenly you will see the huge, chain into the whole society or a whole, office or a condominium, whatever you may say. So, it's ideas which always come up. Thanks, Ben.
May I add something to what Deven said?
Yes, sir.
Deven said, that it depends on what brief you get from your client or what he says. I would go a step further and say that even if the client does not want it, we as professionals, as designers, it is our responsibility to sensitize the client and tell them and hold their hand. Even very few clients will come up with a, sustainable background or consciousness. But if they don't even specify, it's up to us. I feel it's our moral responsibility to tell them that, look, hey, you have to care for nature. You have to design for nature.
No, I agree. The reason I said that it has to come from top is that they need to realize how important water is. Obviously, as consultants, we're there to guide them and advise them what is good for them. That's what I meant.
Yeah. And another point that we've been talking to Terry about this, are there any design norms for office interiors, green interiors? They never had for interiors. So I said, why don't you start,
LEED has sustainability. Yeah.
But Terry doesn't have yet, right?
Also, to your point, right, one of the challenge we've noticed, Bangalore, I feel, has more progressive organizations, right? Like to Deben's point that it has to come from top. What I have noticed in Bangalore is that now there is some maturity on top. They do feel that they should do. Many a times, this decision making, when they have to decide what to do, they're really confused, right? Like, do I do this much rainwater? Do I do surface water? Do I do gray water conversion into potable or black water? What kind of that whole putting it all together? I feel that there is the MEPs who have to probably step up. I'm not saying academic, it's more of an MEP kind of a job, I suppose, to present all this in a, ultimately it's a decision making is where they're stalled. And assuming the big corporates probably are mature. I kind of agree to Deven, but there is a deeper activity side of me which questions that, but I'll put that aside. And I'm just saying that even if they do, many times it's the decision making where they're severely challenged. And they're very confused and they don't know what to do, right? I mean, there are umpteen examples we have seen, but I think that's the problem they're having. Smaller guys, they don't care, no matter how much we think that it's just a side talk.
Deven, there's a question from the audience for you, and you may or may not have an answer, so you can choose to. From BK Prasad is asked that, has Gurgaon made it mandatory that potable water should not be used for construction? Is that a rule?
I think it is a rule.
Yes, it is in the process.
It is in the process. So,
I think
they've actually designated certain areas where you can get the water for construction.
See, in the construction process, it is mandated by all municipal authorities that you have to apply for a separate water connection, for a temporary connection. Or you can use for when you have mass concreting, then you have to buy water, which is from deep bore wells, but not potable water. Most of the construction is done by these borewell private suppliers. Because you're not supposed to tap into the actual municipal supply.
There are some more questions coming up, and some questions on STP. So I will not derail this conversation. I'll go back to it. I think a lot of these things will be anyway answered. So to the audience while this conference proceeds, and why not get Simar, my friend, to talk next. Simar, you and Shriram were selected for a project with the United Nations. And if I remember correctly, you were one of the 30 women selected across Asia. And could you tell us more about this? There might be answers to the question which our audience is posting.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Simar. I'm based in Bangalore and I'm a water worker. About 5 years ago, I had committed to working for water, and my concern was around lakes in the city. And it turned out there was a pattern that emerged that most of the lakes that were being revived were led by women, right? This is just database decisions that, you know, I'm saying that because it is a fact.
I'm keeping my mouth shut.
Perhaps there is something about women who take on leadership roles that they tend to design for the whole system. So when they come up with solutions, they're looking for what is good for nature, what is good for women, children, men, everybody. And I think that's the reason why there needs to be an encouragement for women in the water space, especially in real estate where it's a boys club through and through. So 3 years ago, I started working on wastewater treatment, a wastewater treatment technology. So, you know, the water issue is actually, there is abundant water. I would like to say that there is abundance, at least in the context we are in. There is enough water for everybody. It's just the problem is about regarding management. The other thing that we've noticed with lakes is like the sewage coming out of buildings is what was destroying these water bodies, right? So there needed to be a solution. So 3 years ago, I helped co-found a startup called Eco STP, which is into natural sewage treatment. So for the benefit of the audience who may not know what an STP is, I'll quickly tell you. A sewage treatment plant are broadly of two types. One is aerobic systems, the other is anaerobic. So there are many names, SBR, MBBR, all these different technologies, which use aerobic bacteria for treatment or breakdown, meaning you need to constantly supply it air. So you need blowers and you need all these pumps running 24 hours. You need a dedicated maintenance team, and it's very, very expensive to run. So while the government says that, hey, you need a sewage treatment plant, everyone's got to set it up, they go ahead and use these systems, which actually have been popularized in Western countries, in coal countries. We have the good old septic tank, right? So we can just improvise a septic tank, and that's what Eco STP did. It's an anaerobic system. And Nilanjan, like you were saying that, you know, we need to respect nature. I think we can take a step forward and even learn from nature, because, you know, the systems in nature and the strategies used by organisms in nature are self-sustainable. And so what we did at Eco STP, we were mimicking the cow's gut in underground chambers. So there are multiple chambers. It's a septic tank, improvised. All the sewage comes into the tank. We introduce anaerobic bacteria. The sewage travels from one tank to the other. And as it goes, there are some filters underground and clear water comes out. And we pass it through a similar plant gravel filter that Nilanjan was talking about. And that's how nature treats wastewater. The roots would just absorb the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all of that in the water, and clean water that goes out, we pass it through a sand filter, which is again, you know, charcoal, sand. This is how nature treats water. So we can take inspiration from it, and that's what we did. So Sriram and I worked on this project called Co-Evolve Northern Star. It's a project in North Bangalore. Of course, Sriram was looking at a whole lot of other aspects: the water, energy, materials used, how we could make a more positive impact. That's what Smarter Dharma does with builders and architects. What we did is we implemented Eco STP from the beginning. So the labor camp started using this system, and the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific published our case study as one of the best practices in Asia Pacific region, right? So in simple words, it's an improvised septic tank. It's called Eco STP. And even commercial buildings and corporations have started using the system because, you know, with builders, the attitude is we are going to make a residential housing complex. So let's put the STP in the end and hand over and get out, right? So it doesn't matter. They're looking for compliance. That's the mindset. A lot of commercial buildings are using our system because, you know, the return on investment is high, right? And they are the ones who have to maintain the system. A lot of, I mean, Devendra was talking about these LEED certified buildings. I mean, how many LEED certified buildings have natural STPs? You know, so these are the things to question. We have to go a step forward. We have to do our own research. We have to look for best practices. Otherwise, it turns into a lip service. To say corporations are like crafting sustainability, of course they are. And they adopt these technologies a lot faster. But then it's also the consumerist mindset that we are dealing with. No, is why we are not looking at our water resources. We're not looking at protecting nature. So these are the larger social aspects of what we need to question as we go ahead in the world. And so coming back to Eco STP is a great solution because it's a structure that you can build on your own. Eco STP provides you the design, so it's your own resources you use as you're making the building. You can develop this as well. You are not dependent on groundwater for your flushing needs and everything. And this particular project that Sriram and I worked on is a zero liquid discharge project. So it's completely utilizing, in fact, we're bringing it to drinking quality. The community signed up. They said, okay, so we've used a power-based tertiary treatment to bring it to drinking quality. So it's possible. When you have the will, you can adopt these. And there are so many other things that are happening, and I think there is a need for people like us to build a platform where the best practices can be discussed. And that's what Smarter Dharma is doing, bringing best practices in water, energy. And when we talk about wastewater treatment, let's also remember there's also an energy nexus to it. If we are going zero power with the wastewater treatment, we also have savings when it comes to energy. And we have to start seeing water, energy, food, pollution, how are these interconnected? And on a closing note, I would say that we have to consciously look at how we can meet the sustainable goals, right? And that's what the article that the UN printed was talking about, how private players are now financing the sustainable goals. It's no more the role of an NGO or a government. Everything that we do, we can meet these needs if we are consciously trying to address climate change. Climate change is everyone's concern. It's not just a few entrepreneurs and activists doing this. It's everybody's duty. So yeah, I'll just leave it to that.
Superb, Simar, and you were so passionately talking about it that even if you would have spoken for the next 30 minutes, I wouldn't have stopped you. It was really nice listening to you, and you actually answered some questions which are put in by the panelists. Durai Singham, I hope yours, and Brajesh, yours questions have been answered in a way by Simar, because that's what indirectly was asked by these guys. Sriram, do you want to add anything on this?
Yeah. I was going to say first of all, Simar was speaking for Smarter Dharma much way better than what I would have done. But I just want to add two things. This is earlier also to what we're talking about corporates in general, right? The reason why this builder did, and we did one more project earlier also with him, and I'll share numbers in a minute. The reason they did is, think of this, right? Eco STP needs slightly more space than what is called now the new conventional STP. Now, that's one of the most common reason every real estate developer would tell us, yeah, this needs more space, we can't do. That's because trying to inject sustainability, the very fact that, and I'm glad we have two architects here, right? The fact that we're thinking sustainability is an afterthought, right? We want to design and then say, okay, now how do we inject water treatment? Now how do we inject? When we do that, we're obviously going to be stifled by space and other resource challenges. But if we start the concept level, we say, this is going to be a sustainable building, a future-ready building. Let me use the term future-ready, which I think is much better relatable here. If you think of it that way, then you will make space. I mean, architects are all, I have huge respect for the intellect and capability of architects, right? If we are saying that this is going to be a future-ready building, you would find a place to put a water treatment plant, which is going to save you energy as well as water. So that thinking at that level is one problem missing. Second thing I wanted to add is, now, as she rightly said, CNS is a building which is just done and occupancy is starting. The previous building, just to give numbers, right, to shed light, 3 rupees 50 paise is an average per square feet maintenance cost in that part of town in Bangalore. Now, over a 24-hour month period, we have data for that community, right? The best months was 1 rupee 21 paise per square feet. The worst months was 2 rupees 87 paise per square feet. So we saw 2 rupees 50 paise on an average, which means 1 rupee per square feet, which is like 1,000 rupees on an average saving per month maintenance cost. This is because of sustainability, one of them being the natural water treatment plant. As Simar said, we really brush aside, but we don't figure out that the amount of energy you save daily for the amount of, and look at it further, right? The amount of, because you brought water efficiency, the amount of the volume of water being pumped reduces. and then the energy is saved. So overall savings, we saw the numbers and we were just amazed. So I think that starts because we started it, and the numbers will, hopefully the numbers, if nothing else, will open the eyes of more and more developers to consider, sustainable choices.
Thanks, fantastic, Sriram. And there are a lot of people in the audience who want to now get in touch with you guys. You will probably see, I'm seeing some people already mentioning about this. And it's so much fun doing these webinars from home and hearing doorbells ring. The first doorbell, when it rang, I thought Simar got a chance to speak after such a long time. And suddenly there's a doorbell behind her. And after a couple of minutes, I realized the doorbell was in my house, not in her house. And now it was yours. So this is the third doorbell.
So I need to go check also. There's nobody else at home. So I need to actually go see the doorbell.
Nobody, you can. Yeah. So let me.
At mine too, my husband just crawled behind and went to.
My wife can't.
That's the fun of
And
working from
Sumit,
home.
how does your buzzer sound, and how do I differentiate it from the bell when we have overshot the time?
No, we haven't. We still have time, and I'm going to move to Bhakti. Dr. Bhakti, you moved to Australia from India way back in 1993, and then later in 2000, you got an opportunity to work on a sustainability work during the Sydney Olympics. Sounds interesting. Could you tell us something about this?
Yeah, sure. So Sydney was hosting the Olympics back in 2000, and it just so happened that leading up to the Olympics, Australian government did a very smart thing by announcing that they are going to basically promote sustainability simply because all the infrastructure they built for the Sydney Olympics will be based on sustainability principles. And they were started to quite actively and aggressively promote sustainability within the public sector. And the reason I kind of got into it is because I was until then working as a process design engineer, designing treatment plants and, just as a normal engineer. And of course, as part of a very large, one of the water infrastructure also they decided will be sustainable. And what that meant is they built a huge, what they called as a water reclamation and management scheme. So you can imagine a Sydney Olympic site is made up of number of, open green spaces, which will be used for the, the whole athletic programs, and also residential accommodation for the incoming athletes, and a lot of stadium. So entire infrastructure was built in a repurposed, contaminated site. And that was the first start. And on top of that, the water was decided that the storm water within the area, the wastewater generated in the area, and the water supply will be entirely a closed loop system. And that's what it is, one of the first and the largest water reclamation scheme of Australia. And I had the fortune of, that was my introduction to the sustainability world of water. And ever since got involved in that project, my career actually moved into more strategically helping organizations as part of a think tank group within Sydney, which was formed during this lead up to the Olympics, whose job was to build capacity of water utilities, energy utilities, municipalities on what does sustainability mean for their business. So the way we were doing it was, we were crunching numbers and showing to them that if you had this particular policy that promotes sustainability, or this particular program that promotes sustainability, these are the numbers in terms of the economic, social, and environmental triple bottom line, and actually making a business case for them to invest into these policies and programs so that they were invested, not just because it's a nice thing to do, but simply because it makes good business sense. So that was, the Olympics made my kind of a career move into that strategic sustainability capacity building role for organizations. And therefore it marks one of the important milestones in my career within Australian water sector.
So, Doctor, tell me, how does the water conservation and overall sustainability thing work in Australia versus how it is done in India? Is there a similarity? Is there a complete difference? Because we always think that everything's great outside of India.
Yeah, so look, in terms of similarity, I often say that Australia and India are very same in two aspects. One is both are water stressed. Australia is a very dry continent. It is one of the driest continent on the 10-year dry and 10-year wet cycles, even before the climate change effect started to kick in. And but they have water stress for a different reason. We are water stressed because of the way the population the water demand is. And the second thing that's common is both of us have been ruled by the British. So we have a water governance system, which is very similar, which is it is started off in a very good way with a good intention of
We are losing
being
you.
efficient water supply system. Are you able to hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So India used to have a very good decentralized system, but since the coming of the British, we know that how it all moved top down. That kind of water governance, which has been responsible in a way for today. And so in that respect, that's a common. And the difference is Australia, of course, has been more proactive because of its dry, because being very dry continent in managing water in a proactive way and always on a front foot about making sure water is planned for a long future. Water planning is, and yeah, so that is the difference. And I think having worked there for that long time, I've imbibed those way of thinking, and I feel India adopting them because now we are starting to feel the pinch.
Your voice is breaking a lot.
In very real way.
Sorry,
so it's no longer future ready.
Doctor, we're losing you a lot. Yeah, we're losing you a lot.
No problem. Yeah, I think the internet is unstable.
Yeah.
So I just close by saying that I think in India it's now more like we have to be ready now or yesterday for all the actions to take. But yes, we have made a beginning and there's a lot of opportunities and communities also getting more sensitized, businesses are getting sensitized. So that's why I feel my timing of being here is quite apt, quite proper to get things done.
Fantastic. And I like your, when you read your name, you read Urban Water Doctor. Interesting.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you, Dr. Bhakti. Simar, you spoke about STP and sanitation, and there were some questions around this, so I thought of going back to it. And I'm also aware of your strong views on scavengers and manual cleaning of drains. Do you think it's a time to change?
Absolutely. We are in the 21st century. And why do we need a man to go into a hole? Right? Why do we need these manholes? Why? And in my learning in the last 3-4 years, I learned that obviously it is the Dalit community, the backward classes who suffer the most. Even I know we've been avoiding COVID talk, but they have been in the front line. They are the ones who are removing bodies. They are the ones who are, cleaning things. And the way the government has discriminated, we shouldn't just blame the government or the corporates. Or we have to take charge as citizens of, finding like water sustainability comes with social justice. Like without us looking at that aspect, it's very difficult. So in my learning in the last few years, turns out that more people are dying in the city than in the rural areas, because the city demands like the big pipe that comes in and that brings in water and the big pipe that takes the sewage out. It's like we have to end this big pipe culture. And like Bhakti ji was saying, that decentralization is the way. You can't like think of fixing a landfill without also parallelly thinking, what are we going to do at home to manage waste at source? So the good thing about managing like decentralized wastewater management is that the community gets to reuse the water and does not let it out into the lake and eventually the river, which is completely messing the ecosystem. So when it comes to manual scavengers, turns out that while there are so many deaths that are happening in sewer drains, more deaths are happening inside STPs, right? And I wouldn't name some corporations. It is in the biggest, best facilities that this has happened because of negligence, right? So how are we protecting these lives? How are we going to have a strict policy around what kind of technologies to be used, you know? And after 3 years, I've actually stepped out of EcoSTP. EcoSTP is now a global brand, and it is, you know, we're getting inquiries from Thailand and from Indonesia, all Asia Pacific countries, because the social backdrop is similar. So they can easily adopt this technology. But I'm stepping out now to do more advocacy work and work closely with manual scavengers. Just last month, 50 Safai Karmacharis who, you know, run these trucks and all, they lost their jobs. There are 1,500 Karmacharis who are still contract workers. For the last 2018, it was declared that they'll be given permanent jobs. But that hasn't happened. And this is happening in the 21st century. Whose job is it to ensure that we live in an equitable society? Is it the government? Is it the corporation? Is it the startup? It is everyone's job. You know, in our Indic tradition, I'm not a very religious person, but all these things have been thought out in the Indic text. You know, they say the role of every human is to protect every drop of water that falls from the sky into the earth and back into the sky. They had like a cyclical sense of, you know, looking at water. Where has that gone now? Where has that gone? And I must say that a big part of like the problem is that we have privatized water, we have commoditized water. That is not how we can really build a sustainable society. And maybe that now it is time for corporations to take on the lead and to bring that back, you know, to the people. And I think there is a lot of scope for CSR and for public private partnerships in protecting the lives of these sanitation workers who are going into our drains because their father was doing it. How is this? How are we going to protect water if we don't have respect for human life? You know, it's still respecting nature is still further on. So that's my take. I'll be working more closely with a group called Tamate. From Tamate is that drum, you know, it's a Dalit drum, and that they play to make announcements. And you know, they play the drum when someone is born, when someone has died, and that is. But now the younger people, there are younger leaders that are coming in, and my role is actually to help them find alternative jobs, and to completely even lobby with the government to see what kind of technologies can come in. How can the in Bangalore we call them Raja Kaluways, that's a stormwater drain which is now carrying sewage water. How can that be meant for you know clean water, and how can you have a separate drain, and how can you have technologies where we eradicate manual scavenging and also the concept of manholes? So if there are innovators who are watching this, like what can we do to completely, now there are machineries, there is machine-based technologies for sludge removal and all of that. Why aren't we making it mandatory in different places? So those are the areas where I'm hoping to do more work in the years to come. And my goal right now is to completely eradicate manual scavenging from Bangalore city, because, you know, this is happening globally. This is a new geological age that we have entered because of how humans have treated each other and the rest of the environment. We are in the Anthropocene. So all issues are social. Okay,
You know
there
what?
are, yeah.
It's like, I just can't stop myself saying this, and my apologies. This is not, it's like, Simar Bhaskar rulayegi kya aapki?
Yeah, but these are the harsh facts.
But yeah,
know?
these are the, you know.
And I think respect for water, respect for people, respect for the work that we're doing, this is a,
It's all coming from your heart. You can easily, you know,
yeah.
it's so heartening to listen to you on this. And you know, this brings me to the point where we have, you know, architects and PMs, also Nilanjan and Deben. You know, when you guys design buildings, do we even think of STP in the initial part, or is it like, you know, generally jab sab ho jata hai, ban jata hai, and then you say, there is space over there, why don't we put the STP over there? Do we really put a real thought where our STP should be?
I think it's the first thing on our mind. It has to be. I mean, if there is an architect who is not keeping water, drainage, sewage, energy in his mind, then it's not really holistic architecture.
Super.
I think it is the first thing on our mind, even when we reach a site. I was telling earlier also. In fact, very interesting thing happened in Pahalgam. Very sensitive eco zone again, and the old Pahalgam club had been destroyed. Deven must be knowing that region very well. And there's the Lidar River, a fast-flowing river, and the Jammu Kashmir Tourism floated a design competition for the redesign of the club. And our design diverted the river through the club land and joined back the river. And we used that diverted river through the club as a rainwater harvesting canal, the entire surface, because it was a 5-acre site and also sloping along the river. So we could create small channels, rainwater harvesting channels, which would drain into that large river through the site and then join back the river. And a lot of government officials, we won the competition because of the concept, but when it came to actual designing, then they started questioning why touch the river? I mean, how do you manage the flow and all that? I said, technically, we'll take care of that, don't worry. But they said, for centuries, it has been like this. Pani to chala jata, it goes into the river. Unfortunately, at that time, there was Mufti ji, who was the CM at that time, and this was Pahalgam was his constituency. So he was very passionate about this project. He said, no, we must respect the nature and design for surface drainage. And so let me tell you, STP is not a byproduct of the design. It is treating sewage, water, drainage, the gray water, black water, all that is part of any design. As I say, design is nothing but putting a habitat in nature. It's not really building something. As long as your building becomes part of the ecosystem, it's a good design. So for us, it's always been, at the top of our mind. We don't have to, in fact, Pahalgam did not have a sewage treatment system. So we have utilized the slope of the land, because unless you design your services accordingly, unless you know the topography of the land, how do you locate your STP? How do you locate your overhead tank? How do you locate your underground tank? So those are the first things that come into sight, and the building goes around it. If there are trees, the building goes around the trees. It's not that the landscape has to adjust according to the building.
So you know what Nilanjan, what you're talking about is actually, that is what is called, in Australia, it's a very common practice called water sensitive urban design. So every urban design has to integrate that water sensitivity about where every aspect of it. And then you start to build, as Sriram also said, it doesn't need to be an afterthought and then we feel constrained, but you use the water within your design, and that becomes a water sensitive urban design.
There's also philosophically, there's a reason. That's why Nilanjan is here. Philosophically, the thing is, we are probably the only species on this planet today who look at the entire ecosystem outside of where we are. And we think that ecosystem is there for us to take whatever we can, as opposed to thinking we are part of it. Like I really like the way Nilanjan said that we believe that we're building a habitat into the ecosystem, as opposed to thinking, hey, we're building a building, and then we'll take whatever we can from the ecosystem. That is the mindset shift, which is really needed, and only then. And what the other thing I wanted to add here, we noticed is India is ultimately a kitna deti hai country. No matter what you have, that ad, right? I love that ad. The way they show that the greatest spaceship going to Mars, and this fellow is listening all through and said, "Acha kitna deti hai?" We want numbers. Just because we discovered zero, we believe numbers. So we understood that these decision makers want numbers. If we show numbers and say why this is good, then they will take. I mean, there's a tangible discussion going on. But
I am a little mindful of time. We've got just 2 minutes left. Deven, your part, do you want to say anything on that? And then I will just close with the final comments.
I'll respond to your question later, but let me compliment Dr. Bhakti and Simar. I think the way these guys have thought about it, And when I was listening to Simar, she was fully charged. And, you know,
Yeah, that's why I said, "Rulaigi kya?"
I thought, you know, we haven't gone to those aspects. We just are confined to, you know, a campus or four walls of our, you know, wherever we stay. You know, but the question is at least we started thinking, and it will take some time to undo the wrong things we've done for centuries. And you know what differentiates us from Australia, ma'am, is education. Is, you know, whatever you do, we can't manage with things with so much of population. You'll have challenges.
Yes, absolutely.
Now coming to you know, whether to your question whether STP is an afterthought or not. So I think, you know, and don't get me wrong in this, but you know, the way we think about architects or somebody who's doing a building is like, you know, he's just drawing a sketch of a fancy looking building and just putting it on ground. That's not the fact. It's like, and Nilanjan would agree with me, it's a marriage of creativity and engineering. You know, a building can sustain itself without putting engineering stuff into that. Yes, sometimes it's given the least priority, but it's not that it's neglected. As Simran mentioned, that eco STP would require larger area to set up. Yes, because the real estate is expensive, the developer would say, build more flats and keep less area for STP. I think it's time for us, and what has started from bigger cities like Bangalore and Mumbai, and we are being constantly reminded of how we are abusing our resources and how we're not planning properly. Every city gets flooded. You know, a few months back, I was in Srinagar, and we were having this conference in terms of, I was on the panel where they asked me what went wrong with Srinagar. It's been surviving there for so many years and no floods there. But if you see, it's like a saucer within the, you know, right? And you block the natural exits. It's definitely, it will get flooded. Look at Chennai. We build large campuses on swamps and we just reclaim the land and we just created a mess. So coming back, there is a thought given to it. I don't think there is much attention given to these details. I think it's high time where we think about this as a main utility and something which would benefit everybody, not just to tick a box in your checklist that the government has made STP mandatory or rainwater harvesting mandatory. We just do it for the sake of doing it. So yeah, lot of effort needs to be, you know, put into you know, make people aware of this. And these three people on the panel, Simran, Sriram, and Dr. Bhatti, I think they're doing a great job, and they should, you know, get people on board, not limit to women only, as Sumit.
Yes.
We want to be part of this. And
I agree.
How we can help, you tell us, we can be part of this movement. And
Yes.
I would like to, you know, offer my services.
So there are some like-minded people to be.
Yes.
So here's the challenge I have, not just for just Deben and Nilanjan as architects, but, you know, to the wider community. We've been pushing, and we've got one builder who wants to work with us. I'm saying, look at our approach, right? We build design, and then we're saying, how do we make it efficient? And with all genuine concern, we at times say, okay, now how can I reduce energy efficiency? Increase energy efficiency. How can I reduce water consumption? Can we take a pause and step back and say, I'm going to build this or design this building, whatever infrastructure, which is going to be positive. Let's not talk about how do I reduce. Let's talk about what is it giving back. And I think it's extremely possible. There are enough examples. We've got one, I'm very excited that we've got this project where we're starting in North Bangalore, where from day one, the developer said, okay, I'm with you. Tell me, how is it positive? So you eliminate this out of your mindset that, okay, I'm building it now, I have to make it efficient. Let's stop that. Let's just turn around and say, can we do? I think that's the only way we can turn around, because And here's what I want to say. There is nobody else coming. This is the generation which has to fix. There is no next generation will fix it.
Yeah.
That is a fool's paradise. It's Trump's paradise. this is it. And I can't stress enough on that.
Thank you. Superb. I think really great insights in this panel and some really lovely words and lovely things which we all learned. A lot of questions which were there have already been answered. Manish has recently put some question. I think we are over time right now, so you can probably pick up the phone or email and we can answer questions if you want. We'll have to close now. We're crossed our limit of time. I'm just going to speak a few words which you guys spoke of, which I noted and were, Sriram, of course, you started and it was like passion matters more, money is not everything. And how do we give back? Everyone needs to give back is something very key words you spoke of. Dr. Bhakti said, women and water are an important part of our agenda. Nilanjan mentioned about rainwater is an important resource and water finds its way. Rainwater harvesting is very important. And he spoke of natural purification of water through the soil. Deven mentioned he was very strong when he said that corporates do think of sustainability very seriously. And I do agree with him. I've been part of such forums myself where, so I completely agree. Specifically, large corporates are very serious. Smaller corporates, due to lack of budgets and lack of, initiatives, sometimes they're not as much into it, but everybody, as they grow, they actually become, make it as a part of their journey. Simar spoke of women look at holistic solutions, men are bad. There is abundant water, but bad management. Eco-STP, the word which you used, Simar, is a super hit in this panel discussion. There have been many inquiries for Eco-STP, so you'll get emails. There are a number of people who've asked that they want to know more about Eco-STP.
Even I want to know more about Eco-STP.
Climate change is everyone's responsibility is another thing which Simar mentioned. Dr. Bhakti mentioned about the closed loop system first in Australia, and then Australia and India are in similar positions. Both were ruled by Britishers. It's a reminder and the the way the water system works. Simar again spoke of social justice, and she was very passionate about it. More people are dying in cities than in villages, and the manhole story which you gave was very, very touching. Nilanjan again spoke of water conservation is in the mind of architects when they're designing, and if you're not a complete architect if you do not are planning end to end. So some very key messages I took back during this forum. Thank you so much, all of you. I enjoyed listening to each one of you, and thank you once again, the organizers, Manjeet Singh ji.
Simar wants to
one last thing.
Yes, Simar.
A key takeaway for me from this panel discussion is the net positive mindset. And I'm promised to implement that in everything I'm doing. It's a very good cue to everyone who's in the design space. And I would also like to thank Sumit for really, you've taken so much interest. You've spoken to all of us through the last few weeks, and for Manjeet for creating this platform to really discuss. Like Manjeet has been coordinating with me for 2 months now and saying we have to do a focus session on wastewater. And thank you so much on behalf of the panelists. Thank you so much, Sumit and Manjeet, for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch, Simar,
Yes.
Sriram. Yeah, we look forward to working sometime in future.
Yes.
Been great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sumit.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Deven. Bye. Bye, Manjeet.